Take a look at this building. Now this one. What do both of these places have in common? At first glance, you're probably thinking not much. But it's not what's on the outside that they have in common. It's what they're hiding on the inside. Back in 2022, I was walking back to my car when I spotted this strange windowless beige box of a building behind me. It caught my eye not because how ugly it looked, but just how out of place it seemed, especially in a city like Los Angeles with some of the most expensive real estate in the world. So I did what anybody would do when trying to find an intelligent answer to a question. I took a picture of it and put it on Reddit. Immediately, I got a slew of explanations saying things like it was a storage unit for people from Portland, or some NSA shit. Another person even suggested it was Jared Leto's house. And although it's possible that Jared Leto lives here, I highly doubt it. But there was one comment that stood out to me. It's an oil pump, rig, or whatever it's called. There's a lot all over LA disguised as buildings, which turns out to be the truth. I've lived in LA for over 10 years and I've definitely seen an oil derrick or two around. The most common place being the Inglewood oil fields, which you pretty much drive directly through on La Cienega. But that's clearly a dedicated oil field and nobody's trying to hide that. What surprised me was that there are actually many more oil derricks scattered all over the city that are seemingly invisible. According to this CNBC article, there are 26 oil and gas fields and more than 5,000 active and idle wells in LA. These wells are spread out all over the city from downtown to the San Fernando Valley. And a lot of these are hidden in plain sight in communities like this one. Nestled in a quiet, largely Orthodox Jewish community just south of Beverly Hills, the Cardiff Tower was built by Occidental Petroleum in 1966 and was designed to blend into the community as a synagogue. But in fact, its real purpose is to conceal an active oil drilling site containing 40 functioning wells. And not too far away, until recently, the Tower of Hope stood, a controversial 165-foot oil derrick on the grounds of Beverly Hills High School. For years, this oil well actually provided much of the school's annual operating budget, but in more recent times has been reported to be the cause of some major health issues for students and others living in the area. But if you're just passing by, I bet the average person would barely even suspect what this building was for. To grasp this phenomenon of urban oil drilling, we have to go back to the 1890s when Los Angeles was just a sleepy town of around 50,000 people on the cusp of experiencing one of the largest oil booms in history.
From the dawn of history, mankind has revealed an unconquerable urge to improve his lot. Throughout many centuries, man was unprepared to see the potential servant in a substance that occasionally seeps from the earth's crust: oil.
This was the wild west of oil extraction, with a bounty of easily accessible oil just seeping out of the ground and no understanding whatsoever of the health impacts of oil drilling. There were virtually no environmental regulations until 1915, so for close to 20 years, this created a true free-for-all, where as long as you had the capital and the mineral rights, you could drill wherever you wanted, and many did. During these early frontier days, all an oil man needed to do to strike it rich was find a potential site with some of that black gold underneath and just start drilling before somebody else got there first. In some places, some oil derricks were packed so closely together that their legs overlapped like some dystopian wasteland. For years, this strange urban landscape of oil towers served as a backdrop for everyday life, creating an industrial age apocalyptic scene. But like any boom, some made unimaginable fortunes overnight while others lost their shirt. So behind me is the swimming pool center in what's now Echo Park, but back in the day it was called Toluca Oil Field. And it's where one of the first successful wells was drilled in LA back in 1892 by Edward Doheny, using a DIY system involving a sharpened eucalyptus tree.
Enterprising pioneer oilmen who could not obtain steam drilling equipment rigged up ingenious but primitive mechanical devices known as spring poles to drill their wells. Of course, drilling with this improvised cantilever was painfully slow.
According to legend, a down-and-out Doheny had recently returned to LA after a financially devastating attempt to find oil near San Diego. At this point, he was severely in debt after years of failed prospecting attempts and was so poor he couldn't even afford to pay for his boarding room. Supposedly, he was walking down a street close to what's now downtown LA when he spotted a slick black substance on the wheel of a passing cart. As casually as possible, he convinced the driver to show him exactly where they had come from. And Doheny was led to this area behind me where black tar was seeping from the earth onto the street. Shortly after, he convinced an old business partner to loan him $400 so he could obtain a lease to drill on the location. Long story short, Doheny's instincts paid off and he struck it rich right here on this site. Word of Doheny's discovery spread like wildfire, and the allure of easy riches to be made in the LA oil fields set off a population boom never before seen in the region. If you've seen the classic film There Will Be Blood,
I drink the blood of lambs when band is trapped.
Doheny's the guy who Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Daniel Plainview, was loosely based off.
I drink your milkshake.
Fast forward to 1930, California was responsible for a quarter of the world's oil output, and LA now had a population of 1.2 million, with a diverse and thriving economy.
Oil, the adventurous game of blind man's buff, in which scientists try to locate the prize of black gold far beneath their feet. For the men who have gambled their existence on finding and taking out this substance from wells drilled deep into the earth, the excitement of discovery has never dulled. The state is now one of the largest producers in the country, though oil was found in California only shortly before the turn of the 20th century. Through the following years, the opportunities offered as the great new oil fields were discovered and opened up spurred not only the vast migration westward, but the development of countless other related industries.
Although the economic hardships of the Great Depression were in full swing during this time, the city of LA was on the rise. And through the 1940s, hundreds of thousands of people arrived by automobile. It was a frenzied period of wildcat oil drilling, intense business speculation, religious excitement, extensive suburban development, the birth of aircraft manufacturing, and of course, movie making.
97, take one, mark.
Action.
With oil money flowing and plenty of land for film studios to be built, the golden age of Hollywood made its rise. Almost from the start, Hollywood and the oil business were deeply intertwined. Not only did oil money give the fledgling film industry a financial push in the early days, but oil became an attractive investment for numerous A-list celebrities of the time, encouraged by the tax savings oil investments benefited from. These tax-saving loopholes, which were initially set up by powerful oil lobbyists in the early days, evolved into a tax avoidance strategy that a few stars were taking advantage of, to an industry-wide standard for reducing taxes. In addition, many oilmen reciprocated by investing in Hollywood films, either to profit from blockbusters or write off money lost on flops against their high oil earnings. The tax break in the oil industry provided so lucrative that top-earning celebrities of the time like Jimmy Stewart, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and Bob Hope all made significant fortunes on their oil investments, initially set up as tax deductions to shelter their Hollywood income. Even Howard Hughes got in on the action, first leveraging his family's fortune, made supplying tools for oil drilling to fund his early films and make a name for himself as a director. But over the decades, many of these oil derricks were removed as operations were consolidated. Wells dried up or were encroached upon as the city and its suburbs expanded to engulf them. Although oil production in Los Angeles has now dropped by 90% from its peak, those that remain can be found in the parking lots of fast food restaurants, fenced off alongside homes and highways, hidden behind rows of trees alongside parks, or even tucked into the sand traps of fancy golf courses.
Coyote Hills is both inviting and rewarding.
This is a functioning oil field. Of course, they're green in color, and depending on the time of the day, the oil derricks will be there going up and down.
Many, like the Cardiff Tower and this one behind me, are wrapped in facades to look like nondescript office buildings and are acoustically sound dampered to not make much noise in places like neighborhoods. This unique mix makes LA one of the largest areas in the country to combine thousands of active oil wells in an area amongst a dense population of over 12 million people. But although LA's peak oil boom years are a thing of the past, the city is still dealing with the fallout from years of unchecked drilling. When you look at pictures like these, only a fraction of these wells scattered across the landscape are still in use. Once an oil well is tapped out and no longer in operation, it needs to be sealed correctly in a process called well plugging, which usually involves pumping a bunch of cement into the old well in order to avoid toxic greenhouse gases like methane and other chemicals from leaking out. It might sound easy, but to do this properly, it's extremely costly and can be a complex task. But oftentimes, after an oil well has been used up for all it's worth, operators ditch out on the cleanup bill. Many wells, especially in the early days of unchecked drilling, have become orphan wells, meaning that there's no longer an owner or company that state regulators can hold responsible for them. Many of these wells aren't capped properly, if at all, like this one that was discovered in Echo Park several years ago, that was simply covered with a concrete slab and was emitting dangerous gases. In extreme situations, these wells can also cause explosions like the one that was caused at this Ross store in 1985, injuring 23 people. Although rare, this blast reflects the dangers of a city underlain by thousands of decaying oil wells in various states. According to the LA Times, the state of California estimates that there are more than 5,300 idle wells across the region that are likely orphaned, including about 1,400 in LA. Combined with the fact that years before any regulations were in place, it was common for well operators to fill decommissioned oil wells however they saw fit, often filling them with debris and trash. For example, this orphan well, which was next to someone's house in Echo Park, costed over $1 million to plug. That's just one of over 1,000 orphan wells estimated to be scattered around the city that eventually need to be fixed. So I live in the neighborhood of Westchester, and I wanted to get an idea of how many oil wells there are close to me. To do this, I'm on a website called CalGem, which is essentially an interactive map. Anyone can visit to see where every documented oil well in LA is located. Every point on here is where an oil well currently is or used to be before it was decommissioned. If I'm reading this correctly, the ones that are gray mean that they've been plugged, the ones that are purple mean that they're idle, and the green ones mean that they're still active. Another interesting thing about this website is you can click on any of these well icons and download the well records. A lot of these look like they're currently under people's houses or roads, but I'll just take a look at this one that was on the beach at one point. So I pulled up the well records for this particular well number 2, and it looks like there was paperwork submitted to abandon the well around August of 1940. It looks like they filled it with cement and capped it off. So on this particular well, there's over 33 pages of paperwork, and I found the intention to drill that was submitted November 1930, and it describes everything they used to drill it, the process, and it's pretty descriptive. One interesting piece of paperwork here in July 1932, there's kind of a performance description, and it talks about how the well was drilled to a depth of around 6,000 feet without any mishaps. It says it produced clean oil and came in on or about October 4th, 1931. After producing for about 30 days, the well was destroyed by fire. The tubing dropped in the well during the fire and had to be fished out. And up to this day, on July 14th, 1932, it produced approximately 300 barrels per day of clean oil. Now, around this time when this well was registered in 1930, this oil field in Venice oil field, was one of the top producers in Los Angeles, and probably the United States for that matter. Looking over this paperwork, it's kind of like looking at a piece of history. Now, let's check out what remains of this well number 2 today. So this is approximately where oil well number 2 used to be, and it's kind of hard to imagine how this area in Venice Beach has gone from looking like this to looking like this now. I looked around and I don't see any remnants now of the oil wells that used to be scattered around this area, much less the one that we're looking for. If the location on the map is correct, my guess is that the well we're looking for is capped somewhere on this beach or under one of these houses and is no longer visible, much like the hundreds of other wells that were dug here back in the day and that have since been capped and buried and built over by what's now houses. By 1932, many of the wells in the Venice Beach oil fields had dried up and oil extraction in this area had dropped significantly. It was a good run for oil speculators in the area, but a short one. By the tail end of 1942, close to 50 million barrels of crude oil had been taken from the shoreline here. And with the wells running dry, the unsightly oil derricks were being removed as the population grew and people wanted their beach back. By 1972, nearly all of the wells here had been capped, and by the early 90s, the field was completely dry. Supposedly for a time after which every oil derrick was removed here, there was one lone oil derrick remaining in operation somewhere around this area that was camouflaged to look like a lighthouse. But I was unable to find where this was located or even any pictures of it, so I'm not 100% sure that this actually existed. Although I have to say a lighthouse is pretty creative camouflage when it comes to hiding an oil derrick. There's one area not too far from here that has taken this concept of camouflaging oil operations to a whole new level, and this one is still alive and well. So I'm down in Long Beach right now, which is not technically part of Los Angeles, but it's right next door. Across the water here is a place called Astronaut Island, which actually looks like a nice enough place. There's palm trees, nice landscaping, something over there that looks like an apartment complex. From here, it actually kind of looks like a resort, but in reality, it's strictly off limits to the public. And why is this, do you ask? Because just like a movie set, everything you see here is fake. Of course, the trees, the plants, and the buildings are all real, but this is all a facade to hide what's really going on inside. In fact, this isn't even a natural island. It's completely man-made for the sole purpose of extracting oil. Boasting palm trees and a sound mitigating landscape. These islands are the end result of a compromise made between the people in the local community and big oil interests coming together in an agreement to allow oil drilling in the area while also taking steps to prevent it from becoming like this. The developers even went as far as to hire the architect responsible for designing the artificial landscape in Disneyland, almost completely obscuring the true nature of what's really going on inside. These islands costed $22 million each in 1965, but the money spent has been well worth the investment, because to this date over 1 billion barrels of oil have been recovered from this patch over the past half century, all while hiding in plain sight, making Astronaut Island the only decorated oil islands in the United States and a huge producer. I think it's safe to say that oil drilling in LA has come a long ways, from the freewheeling days of this to this. But even though oil drilling in LA has gotten a makeover in the 21st century, it's still not without its risks. In a historic first, California oil regulators approved 0 new drilling permits in the first quarter of 2024. And recently, LA City Council voted to ban new drilling and set aside money to cap old wells. Although oil played a significant role in the history of the area, I think it's safe to say that the city is now distancing itself from the industry that helped build it. This is in part due because of the state's push into renewable energy, combined with the fact that after more than a century of aggressive drilling by fossil fuel companies, most of LA's profitable oil is now gone, although remnants of the industry can still be seen all over the city today.
It's called Los Angeles, the city of the angels, this sprawling metropolis that sits between a ridge of mountains and the beaches of the blue Pacific. New earthbound angels keep pouring in by the thousands every year. People from all over the world, drawn by a city of limitless boundaries, a city with an unlimited capacity for enjoying itself, and one that offers unlimited opportunity.
Within the span of little over 100 years, what was once a sleepy boomtown morphed into one of the largest and dynamic economies in the world, known for entertainment, aerospace, tech, trade, fashion, and much more. And there's no doubt that Los Angeles has outgrown its past as one of the largest oil distributors in the world. As for urban wells like this one in Beverly Hills, dubbed the Tower of Hope, the decades-old drilling site was shut down in July 2017 and has since been dismantled. Lawsuits claiming chemicals associated with this rig causing cancer were either dismissed or settled, but it continued to operate until the owner, a company called Venice, filed for bankruptcy. Towards the end of its life, instead of calling it the Tower of Hope, some found a new name for it, the Tower of Hope You Don't Get Cancer.